Great. Well, everybody, thanks for joining again. This has been a great series, just kind of going deep into security. And today, kind of the theme, we want to talk mostly about email security, but it's kind of this theme we've been chatting about you can't just do one thing when it comes to security. We need a bit more of a holistic approach. And so, the title of the webinar is that detection is not enough. And our thought here is that we need both. It's a both and. But specifically when it comes to phishing just being one of the most prominent attack vectors. It's how ransomware gets in the door. It's how the scams happen where your clients are issuing gift cards and hopefully not transferring hundreds of thousands of dollars over the wire to scammers. But it's such a big attack vector. And with everything that's happened with work from home and so many people all over the place, emails just become, the hacker's favorite way to kind of get in the door. So with me today is Dave Baggett. He's the founder and CEO of INKY. Dave, do you want to maybe just say hey to everybody in like
Sure.
2 seconds?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for spending part of your busy day with us today.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll go into, you've seen similar slides in the format. I'm not going to spend too much time going over go-to-market everything. I always like to throw in a couple memes, a couple stats that hopefully you can use in a customer-facing meeting. Just when it came to email security and email defense in general, this one, most MSPs have been using some form of email security for quite some time right now. So we just wanted to talk about a little bit of the modern strategies and modern ways of keeping your clients safe. So we'll probably go straight into some of the deeper technical stuff. But we do have one foolproof way for your clients to keep themselves safe. Just don't check your email. That's 100% bulletproof way of keeping yourself safe from scammers. So of course we know that's not going to happen. So if we jump into this, we've talked just a couple days ago, even in our previous webinar, that Microsoft is just encouraging everybody to leverage basic hygiene. If you are doing things like MFA, least privilege access, bit of email security, bit of training, bit of zero trust, we don't have to go deep into the 100-point checklist that Microsoft Security Center often recommends. You certainly don't need a Microsoft Secure score of 100% to keep a client safe. They're literally saying the basic hygiene is going to prevent against 99% of the attacks. I've definitely been seeing this at the conferences that I've been going to. Curious if other people on the webinar, in the events that you attend, what kind of stories are you hearing when it comes to people, white hat hackers and other people like that present? And they're just talking about how it is so easy to go after SMBs today that you can literally just start 50 ransomware campaigns knowing that 2/3 of them are going to be successful. And so when you fail on the third, so the businesses that actually have decent security, they just give up. They don't even need to go to the next step because they can just do a whole nother round of 50 new businesses next month to target. So that basic hygiene is gonna, you're gonna run faster than the slowest team member and the bear will get somebody else. That's kind of the goal here. I won't belabor this point. Today we're talking about all things phishing. Dave was very quick to remind me that, INKY's pretty good at helping with some of the social engineering as well. So we'll get into that. And then of course, locking down the environment, and then having a decent business continuity, disaster recovery solution as well. If we have kind of everything in that row blocked, protected, those are the layers of security that the average MSP is trying to secure in their customer environment. So when it comes to email phishing, I had no shortage of memes. This was actually a battle to pick my favorite meme for this. You just Google phishing memes or security memes like that. It's awesome. And we love The Office, so I got to go with Michael Scott on this one. Cool stat for you to share next time you're in a client call is we're up to 3.4 billion phishing emails being sent daily, which equates to an extortion attempt every 11 seconds. So often, the small, medium business owners you're talking to, they need some kind of stats, some kind of leverage I don't think they need a lot of encouragement around phishing. Pretty much everybody's has received, or has been breached. So this is a good one where usually you can get your foot in the door. Just wanted to throw in an interesting stat there. Like I said before, talking about anti-phishing and email security and locking kind of the front door digitally when it comes to communication. And then even a little bit, so we had the CyberHoot webinar on Tuesday. We talked about, training people, making them more aware so they don't fall victim to email phishing scams or giving away credentials or other problems. But I would say, Dave is probably going to touch a little bit on both of these, where preventing the email from getting in the door is critical. No solution is 100% perfect, so some are always going to get through, but having something in the user's face that can prevent them from clicking that link or taking that action is also beneficial. So I don't want to give away too much before Dave gets into it. And then, just because I usually get asked the question, in this whole move from a la carte time and materials per service offerings to this per user model, where you're trying to get $100, $150, $200 per user at your client, email security definitely falls into this user security bucket. So if you have your hourly support, your endpoint security, those 5 kind of security breach vectors that I talked about before, they all fit in that user security bucket quite nicely. So I'm going to hand it off to Dave. This is a presentation that he gave at a conference recently. We've tried to trim it up. We like to keep our webinars to about 30 minutes. So we'll jump into this. I'll monitor the Q&A. Please, ask any questions at any point, and I'll try to respond, or I'll save it for Dave at the end. So Dave, I'll kick it off to you.
Thanks, Jan. I encourage everyone to ask questions rather than just let me prattle on at you.
Perfect.
Let's you want to turn it over to me so I can drive?
Yeah, go for it. I'll go on this slide, but here we go.
So INKY is an email security platform, and I know the first question everybody wants to know the answer to is, why should I care about this? There's lots of email security platforms. What makes INKY different? So I'm going to start with just a very quick overview of what I see as the 4 critical advantages that we offer partners. And then I can describe a little bit how we detect fish that are getting through other systems. But I think the first one that everyone should be aware of is, to Ali's point, we actually do sort of a hybrid offering where we combine some of the best elements of blocking phishing, blocking malicious emails like a SEG would do, and also coaching users. So the first big differentiator is, about 7 years ago when we started working on this platform, we saw everyone was doing the external tag, right? So they'd put the external tag on a mail, and that was supposed to tell users to be careful. And we liked that idea, but we kind of thought it's not that useful, because if you put external in every single email, people become blind to it. And also, really, what does external tell your user to do? Nothing. But we like the idea of communicating information to the user. And over this 7-year period, this has really evolved into a full-featured email assistant. This completely lives inside of the inbox. There's no plugins or add-ins required. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. But it has 75 different kinds of things that it can say to your user. And some of those things are, hey, you know what? This is a wire request. Here's a reminder and a link to your company policy. Don't wire money without confirming outside of email. Similarly, don't go buy gift cards, that sort of thing. Simply warning somebody about the content, the sensitive content. We can also use this banner, it's a yellow banner, to essentially give people information that may not be clearly visible to them. And that could be a case like, hey, this sender usually sends mail from North America. This mail is coming from Kazakhstan. That's not proof the mail's malicious, but it certainly is something we want the end user to know. So we're kind of turning real emails into teachable moments, in addition to blocking the stuff that's obviously bad and moving it to quarantine. I think this is probably the most visible differentiator we have, and it really resonates with end users and your customers. You're showing the value to them continuously by using something like this. And I'll show you what it looks like momentarily. The second thing we do,
And just we use that
yeah,
internally here at Augmentt, and my IT director said it was super easy to deploy. But like I stare at these all day long, so I get the banners, I get the recommendations, and it's just all right there. It makes it easy to report or report phishing, report a scam, or just mark the email as safe. So I use that every day, and it's like it's no issue. And like Dave says, like everything used to be external, and what do I do with that? I just ignore it because everything coming, I talk to lots of people outside of Augmentt all day long. This actually, when it comes up yellow, points my eyes in a particular direction to focus on something.
yeah, and the goal there really is we want the user to simply slow down and think, even for a second, right? Before they click on something, before they take some unfortunate no-click action like sending all the W-2s to China. We want them to think, pause, and reflect before they take an action on the minority of mails that we put yellows on. Now, I know everybody in cybersecurity likes to talk about their AI, and everyone's eyes roll when people start talking about AI. We do use some really interesting AI techniques in the product, and I like to give you a sense of how it's working so you can understand intuitively what we're doing. One example is brand forgery detection. And if you think about phishing writ large, it's usually dependent on the attacker convincing the recipient victim that he's a brand or a person they trust. So in the brand case, if I'm a bad guy, I can just take a real mail that I got from Microsoft or one of 100 brands and essentially replay it to you with some minor changes. And you, the recipient, are going to easily recognize that's that brand. If you think about it, it's kind of an amazing ability that our brains have to do this, right? You can give somebody a mail they've never seen before, and in less than a second, they're like, oh, it's Microsoft, right? So that's the mechanism of action that attackers are using to phish people. So again, years ago when we started working on this, we realized, well, we really need INKY to know what brand the end user is going to think the mail is from, right? So that requires us to render the mail. We actually run browsers in the cloud to do this. And then we run computer vision classifiers on the output. So we can essentially recognize brand imagery, brand text, and so on. And this essentially, bottom line, gives us human levels of accuracy in identifying emails that appear to be from about 300 different brands now. And you can imagine where this goes, right? If the brand appears to be from Microsoft, then it better be from a legitimate mail server operating on behalf of Microsoft, not some random domain. So it's kind of like, if you know about how DKIM works, this is a further alignment check beyond just DKIM, but also aligning that the visible brand is matching the legitimate mail server that sent the mail. As far as I know, this is unique to our product. I'm not aware of anyone else doing this, and it does let us catch a lot of stuff that gets through legacy systems. And I'll show you an example of this in a moment. The other thing is that the AI we use, we try to develop detections that, rather than being sort of like a whack-a-mole approach, that we try to do what I like to call like build from first principles. So for example, if you think about the brand forgery detection, that's actually trying to model what the human's going to see. So it generalizes to all new examples, just like your own brain can. We tend to try to do that when we see a new tactic that attackers are using. And there's a really nice feedback loop here. Below the banner that we inject, there's a report this email link, and that essentially lets end users report stuff either to you or to us or both. And so most of our customers and partners tend to let our analysts review the reported phish. And that means that we constantly see every single day in real time the new tactics that attackers are evolving, because they are always constantly evolving. And this lets us have essentially a really tight, analysis and development loop where, an example recently was QR code phish. A few months ago, we saw this explosion of QR code phish. Our analysts first saw that in the form of reported phish. And then within 10 days, we fed that into the development process and got an initial QR code detector into the product, into production in 10 days. And we've since improved that a couple times. But the point is, we like to use this feedback and analysis loop to have a tight development process around identifying and solving for new tactics that attackers use. And again, in ways where possible, generalized to new examples we may not have seen before. And then finally, and this is, I think, really huge for our partners, it's so much easier to deploy and admin this system than what you're used to. We don't require any plugins. Everything is simply done by modifying the HTML of the mails. So it works on any mail client. It installs in minutes. One stat that I heard from one of our partners just amazed me, but he basically said, when I was on Proofpoint, I spent 40 hours a month doing care and feeding of Proofpoint. And when I switched to INKY, it dropped below an hour. So it's 95% less work you're doing to manage this. It's mostly set it and forget it. There's an initial setup period where we'll help you configure it. That's usually a couple weeks. And then there's very little care and feeding you have to do. The other point I'll make on this is that report this email function is useful for reducing the admin overhead as well. And the reason is we put a lot of self-service capability in there. So when a user reports a mail, it'll ask them, the INKY will ask them, like, do you think it's safe, spam, or phishing? If they say it's phishing, then of course it comes to us for analysis. If they say it's spam, then we send them down a workflow where they can allow and block senders and even entire domains just for themselves, which means that you're not getting a zillion tickets asking you about spam. You're just getting very, very minimal amounts of that stuff. And it's really a huge game changer. And also the end users like it because they don't have the problem of, I keep reporting spam. Why am I still getting it, right? This is a very direct, simple way for them to solve the problem for themselves. So I'll pause there. Any questions on any of these four? Obviously, I'm going to go into a little more detail on what the banners look like, how that works, and then some on the detection side. But wanted to pause there and see, does it make sense to everyone?
Yeah, maybe Dave, just while people are talking, I don't think we talked about this yet. You brought the QR code thing up before. Are there
Yeah.
any other trends you've seen in the past kind of 2 years of
Oh gosh, yeah.
how the tactics are changing? I'm sure it
Yeah.
happens often, but
Yeah. So when I show you some of the computer vision stuff, I'll get into this. But in general, attackers are constantly evolving ways to hide their scammy stuff from the secure email gateways.
yep.
You might have heard of zero font. That's one of maybe 24 kinds of related tactics. One of the things I'll show you is that by virtue of rendering every mail, we also have countermeasures against all those cloaking techniques. So that's a constantly evolving thing. The other thing we're seeing a lot of is what I like to call the extra step approach. So for example, attackers know if they put a bad, phishing link in an email, well, like every email security system is going to notice that. So instead, they'll put a link to Google Drive and then put their bad link on Google Drive. So essentially using an extra step, hosting the bad content on a cloud service, even to the point where we see attackers using systems like SurveyMonkey, where you can create free accounts to basically craft fake Office 365 login pages using the SurveyMonkey HTML editor and essentially redirecting people to SurveyMonkey where they then phish their credentials. So one thing that we do, again, kind of in a general way, is when there's an extra step, we go and take the extra step. So if there's a link that uses a link shortener, we're going to unshorten it. If there's a link to Google Drive, we're going to go see, well, what's on that page? We also look at the content of websites that are referenced in the mail. So you may get an INKY banner that says, hey, this is a brand impersonation site. That means that something in the mail, whether it's in an attachment or the body, links to a site which we thought was a fake Microsoft page or something like that. So yeah, it's a constant ever evolving landscape. And I have to say, it's both horrifying and somewhat impressive how clever some of these guys are. These guys know a lot about HTML, CSS, Unicode. I mean, stuff that when we see it, sometimes we're like, wow, that was smart. That's very impressive. What are we going to do about that?
No, and I think sometimes, the Nigerian prince joke that I had at the top there, like we've come a long way since the 90s, attack vectors and things like that. And it's just, often I wonder how truly big these industries are. Like, are they even bigger than us as the security industry? And probably so.
I
But
bet.
it will be a never ending, constantly evolving thing. I see it on the MFA side all the time. Microsoft is trying to get people to adopt MFA. And even once you've adopted MFA, they're like, well, not so fast. SMS is not safe enough. Go to,
Right.
Authenticator app. Oh, even Authenticator app, make sure that people aren't stealing tokens from local machines and things like that. So it's, they're always going to find the next loophole around whatever wall we put up. And again, doing all of the basics is great. And then it's good that people are attending webinars like this just to stay up, because there's so many areas to keep on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other one that comes to mind, especially for partners that have smaller companies, often smaller companies will say, well, I'm not going to get phished. I'm not big and I'm not important. They're going to phish some big companies. Well, on the contrary, we see a lot of evidence now that attackers are automating using scraping of LinkedIn and other social media sources to automate sending templated emails and kind of filling them in like Mad Libs to target people, even doing things like noticing, hey, this guy just got a new job, like let's phish him using information from LinkedIn and using the name of his boss that we know from LinkedIn and send him a phish the day he starts. So that doesn't require you to be a big company. That just requires that you're on LinkedIn to be targeted.
Yeah.
So let me talk a little bit about the banners, because again, I think it's probably the most visible, most visible thing about our product. And it really is a tremendous game changer. And again, this is mobile friendly. You can see on the left there, the banner adjusts to fit into the mobile space. Works with any client, so it works with the regular iOS mail app. There's no plugin. This doesn't require an Outlook add-in or anything like that. We support banners in 35 different languages now. And as I mentioned, the banners will say one of around 75 different things now, and we're constantly adding them. So for example, when we added the QR code detection, obviously if we find a malicious QR code, we're going to move that to the quarantine. But now we also put a yellow banner on every QR code mail saying, hey, don't scan random QR codes and emails, right? Just think about that. And to your point earlier, why don't we just block all mail? As funny as that is, it does kind of come up when we develop a new detection like QR codes. People will often ask, why don't you just block all mails with QR codes? Well, so here's a stat. About half of the emails that we process with QR codes in them are phish, but the other half are things like bus passes and museum entry, and you can't block those because then people can't go to the museum anymore. Another stat.
I mean, I just took the family to the movie theater the other day, and I love getting my confirmation emails with a QR that I just scan when we get there, kind of thing.
Yeah,
And I'm going to use a QR code at the end of the webinar for signing up for more information. Like, it's just, they're a part of life. They're great, but until they're not, right?
exactly. So we treat QR codes as sensitive content, but we still deliver them. We have this third way where we can deliver the mail with a guidance, and that's what the yellow is for. And as I mentioned, also the yellow can be used to say, yeah, we can't prove this is bad, but kind of looks suspicious, so maybe think about it before you reply. Maybe your friend's in Kazakhstan and this is legit, but we're not sure. So there are many of these gray area cases where there's not enough information to prove it's malicious, but you also don't want to be completely silent, right? You want to tell the user what you know, and that's what this yellow is all about. And again, I mentioned this before, but this report this mail link, again, it's not something buried in the Outlook toolbar, right? This is just in the mail. They click the link and it comes up with a page that prompts them for their guess as to the status of the mail, safe, spam, or phishing. And that again unlocks this whole workflow where they can self-serve. Yeah, I don't want to get this mail. I don't want to get any mail from this domain anymore. Or I don't want to get mail from this sender. So again, you're just not getting bombarded by requests for every single mail someone doesn't like. The other thing we do here, there are a couple quality of life improvements we've made to the concept of banners over the years. One is that we strip the banners from replies. So when your user replies to a mail that has a banner, the recipient of their reply will not see the banner. So the mail goes out through us, the banner gets removed, and there you're not leaking any OPSEC. And also people are like, how come my mail got a yellow banner? That's not cool. You don't have that issue. Similarly, in terms of quality of life, if you've used the external tag or another banner function in another product, you've probably noticed that they tend to screw up the little preview snippet that you see in the mobile client in your message list, where it shows you the first two lines of the mail, and now it says external in every one of them. We actually inject our banner in a clever way so that it doesn't interfere with that preview snippet at all. So from the end user's perspective, it really does feel like it's part of their mail client, even though it's just done by modifying HTML as the mail transits through us. Any questions on the banner? And then I'm going to do a few minutes on detection, and then we can just do Q&A.
Yeah, I've definitely caught myself, Dave, reporting probably, 5 times as many emails just because I don't have to go rooting for a report link.
Yeah, and you don't have to force your end users to use a different mail client either. We found there's a lot of friction around that. People want to use the iOS mail client. They just do. Just that's what they're used to.
And Dave, I know I was on a call with a partner the other day. It wasn't asked here, but they asked about customization for the banners. I probably gave a pretty crude answer to that. But for routing and dealing with things and that, I know that there's customization certainly on kind of the critical types of events. Maybe speak to that.
Yeah, there's a couple aspects of customization for the banners. One is what banners do people receive, and you can set up within your team, we call it a team, you can set up, I don't want this organizational unit to get this type of banner. They get too many of them, they're a nuisance. You can basically say, like, I don't want to see Salesforce spoofing because Salesforce just does this all the time, and we know they're a real vendor that we use. You can basically at a micro level enable and disable these. Per organizational unit, per user, and so on. The other aspect is there are a variety of formats to the banner, ranging from micro to verbose. So you can decide how much detail you want to put in the banner, like how big it is, even things like you can force the report, this mail link, to go inside the banner. Some people have trained their users to not click links in mail, and this gets them to say, like, you still shouldn't click links in mail unless the link's in the banner, and then it's okay to click it. So there's a lot of options here. And the final thing I wanted to mention, again, I like to give people a sense of, we say we're doing things that detect fish that get through other systems. Why is that, and how do we do that? And here's some, I think, basic insight into this. So imagine you receive this mail. You've probably seen lots of examples like this. Microsoft's the most fished brand. But again, we look at over 300 brands now and recognize them. But in a case like this, you can imagine, well, how does the human recognize this as Microsoft, right? Well, it says Office 365 in big letters, right? So there are obvious signals to our human brains. Making those signals recognizable to a machine is quite subtle. For example, if you see a LinkedIn or a Facebook logo in an email, you might think, well, then it's impersonating Facebook or LinkedIn, right? No, because what if that logo is in the lower right corner and it's tiny? That means they want you to like them on there, not that they're impersonating it. So we incorporate where things are on the screen, how big they are, and of course, what the text says. And we do this by rendering every mail. So every single mail that comes through, we're rendering it, and then we can run classifiers, both visual and textual, on the output. And usually we'll look for corroborating evidence. So just the fact that a mail says Office 365 doesn't mean that we're going to say it's impersonating it. In this case, the fact that that's large and red in the upper left corner, that's significant to us. There's lots and lots of these sorts of heuristics that help us do this with a very, very low false positive rate. And essentially at human levels of accuracy for the brands we cover. Now, one final thing, and people love this because it's just so unexpected. I mentioned the cloaking techniques like zero font. One of the things that was a happy accident that we discovered, we built this whole rendering pipeline to identify brand impersonations, right? But we found out it's also really useful for countering the cloaking techniques. This actually is what this mail looks like under the hood. If I can go to the next slide. It's not letting me.
I can do that.
There we go. Yeah. All that green text, that's in the mail, but they set it to zero font. All I did was I tweaked the CSS to make it visible so you can see it. You can see exactly why they're doing this. They know that the legacy systems are heavily dependent on regular expression matching to look for patterns like Office 365, or we've detected something unusual about your account. So they're pattern matching the text. And by inserting all this extra text, they're confusing the pattern matchers. They're making the regexes not match. And there really is no good way to deal with this in the context of a regex engine. So here again, the attackers know exactly what the incumbent systems are doing, and they're smart enough to know how to break them. And also, of course, do it in a way that the user doesn't even see. So the user still perfectly identifies this as, oh, it's Microsoft. It says Office 365. Now, one of the things that we discovered is hey, we have both the rendered version and the raw version because we render every mail. So when we render this, we know that it says Office 365 because that green stuff doesn't get rendered. So we actually have two different versions of the mail that we can compare and contrast. And this gives us a profoundly powerful way of countering these cloaking techniques, which are in some cases truly amazing. So I'll give you a couple examples of brilliant attacker tactics that we now counter. One is just like zero font, we were seeing emails that had Office 365, let's say, some brand indicative term, but the text in the mail was backwards. It's like, how does that work? It says Office 365 on the screen, but it's written 563 ECIFFO in the actual body of the mail. How does that work? Well, the clever attacker realized I just can set the script rendering direction to right to left for that text, like Hebrew or Arabic, and it'll just render like backwards. So, I mean, pretty impressively smart. Another example that I love is I mentioned we look for logos, right? So we have to segment all the imagery in the mail and extract logos, run them through the similar kind of thing that you get when you search your Google Photos for cats or something, right? Like it's neural network models that are trained on zillions of pictures of cats. We do a similar thing with logo imagery. But we found that there was a class of emails that was getting through, not getting detected as Microsoft, that had a big Windows logo in the upper left corner. On further inspection, our analysts realized, oh, wait, that's not an image. It's an HTML table with 4 squares. And they set the color of the 4 squares to be what the Windows logo looks like. Again, you got to render the mail, right? You have to actually turn it into an image to be able to do this kind of analysis. There are at least a dozen other similarly impressive, nasty things that these guys have figured out over the years. And again, we
Microsoft should have kept the shifted logo.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes they'll warp the images and try to do kind of basic stuff. But, I would say probably once a quarter, we see something really interesting and new. And, it's sort of fun to be the white hat guys, but I wouldn't underestimate the black hats out there. They're very, very smart. And as I said, they have a great deal of sophistication when it comes to understanding how the incumbent systems work, what they depend on.
What you were just talking about there with the logo impersonation and everything, we've been talking to MSPs about branding the login portal for Microsoft. It's a perfect opportunity for you to put the company logo protected by your MSP logo. And that becomes a branded portal people should be logging into rather than just a generic portal. But it's all these little kind of social engineering white hacks that we can kind of do to make things better and hopefully slip in a little bit of business benefit as well. If you're interested in seeing INKY in action, go ahead, scan this QR code. I promise it's none of the scary QR codes that Dave was talking about. And essentially that'll just take you to a registration page, sign up for that, and we'll get you access to a demo of the product. In previous webinars, we've talked a little bit about go-to-market strategies, everything. We have a whole host of resources to help you not only use a great product like this, but how do you pitch it? How do you support it ongoing? What resources can I give to my customers from a sales, from a monthly business review, quarterly business review perspective? So all of that's available. As always, reach out to your partner success manager if you want to learn more about INKY, about the platform, about how to pitch and sell email security services or any Microsoft 365 related security services. Appreciate you hopping on.
Likewise. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Appreciate it. Take care and Merry Christmas. Bye.